Ah, so many words. Boom. That's not Zanzibar. That's a different thing. That's a place. So diet. You guys know what a diet is? And not like, I want to lose a few pounds.
Like what you
Yeah, well, not what the diet we're talking about. We're talking about politics. Although I did read an interesting story the other day about, like, what all in a day is more than the obese person eat. And that was fascinating and disgusting at the same time. But anyways, back to diet. Diet refers to a type of government that is specifically a parliament that has a strong central figure at its core. So, for instance, in the German Diet, the Kaiser had most of the power, with some power granted to the Bundesrat and the Reichstag, which are the two houses in the parliament. In England, the king slash queen really doesn't have that much power compared to the actual parliament. So it's kind of two sides of the same coin. Why that matters. When Japan modernizes, it's not just technology that's at the forefront, it's philosophy, it's how the government will be structured, it's how the economy is going to be run. It's every aspect of society has to change. And so that's going to play kind of an important role as they decide, hey, what kind of government do we want to have? What is it we're looking for in a government? They literally are shopping around, seeing who had the best government. They checked out the United States, they checked out Great Britain, they checked out Russia, they checked out Germany, and they decided that Germany was the way to go. So they based their own government off of the Diet because they wanted a strong central figure. A samurai. We actually talked about this not too terribly long ago, and by not too terribly long ago, I mean quarter two. What is a samurai?
a Japanese warrior.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys know what the term samurai means? Those who serve. And that is kind of the heart of what a samurai is. Yes, they are a warrior, but they owe service to a lord. Now, the relationship is medieval. It's feudalistic. Basically, you have a land-owning nobleman who has samurai to fight his wars. Now, keep in mind, samurai were highly skilled, highly trained individuals, and so the battlefield isn't like rife with samurai. It's you have a lot of peasants wielding spears, and then you have samurai that are your elite shock troopers. Now, generally speaking, if I say samurai, what type of weapon do you think of?
A sword.
Yeah, a type of sword, right? There's actually three that a samurai would use.
Would it also be like a spear?
The naginata, yeah, was a glaive or a polearm kind of similarity. Although in truth, samurai, their main weapon was actually none of those things. It was a bow and arrow, specifically called the yumi. They also had a really kind of ferocious, like mace-like weapon called a kanabo, which was used to just smash things. It weighed like 20 pounds. Like, we're talking huge, but it wrecked people. But the bow was the most difficult thing to use because they rode on horseback. So it's firing a bow from the back of a horse. And this was really the thing that dominates the battlefield through the Middle Ages, through the medieval and feudalistic periods. And so it takes a lot of skill to use properly. That's the thing, really more than anything else, that makes firearms replace bows and arrows. Because bows and arrows are very, very hard to use. Rifles, not so much. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not like trying to downplay anyone who's skilled a rifle. I mean, it takes a lot of skill, but compared to a bow and arrow, where you're going to use it in battle, takes a lot more training. That's why they replace it. So the samurai are these elite soldiers, but they also have within them, within their warrior ethos, this code of conduct called Bushido, which basically can be summarized as a code of conduct, but it's really a way of life, where you owe everything to your lord. Literally, the philosophy is you are already dead. You are not living, you're kind of on borrowed time. So your entire life is wrapped around serving your Lord to the best of your ability. And, this kind of tied to the idea of honor, although really the philosophy emerges out of a combination of Shinto traditional beliefs and Buddhism, Zen Buddhism specifically. And, there's a lot of aspects to it and how one was supposed to conduct themselves. But the main thing of it was loyalty was at the core of it. And so there's this almost romantic view we have in the modern world of the samurai, sort of like how we have this romantic view of medieval knights. Now, does that mean that they were all nice guys? Of course not. They're guys with swords. They were enforcers. They were the fist, so to speak, of the local lords. If peasants revolted, they would go and slaughter them all, sort of thing like that. But it wasn't about, necessarily morality, doing the right thing in a situation. It was about serving one's lord to the best of their ability. So it made them ferocious combatants. However, with the introduction of the firearm, they basically became marginalized. What we're going to see happen is the samurai were very important people who ended up using their military strength and their political acumen to end up creating the Meiji period. And in turn, with the modernization of the military, they become basically worthless. They hang around for a while acting as supervisors, but that wasn't really what their main job was. And so they just kind of fade away as they're not really that important in a modernized, it's kind of Western style military. And so the ideals of the samurai sort of kind of linger as part of popular culture, and eventually it's kind of used and twisted in World War II. We'll get to that later. Zaibatsu. Zaibatsu were factories, so to speak. Well, not exactly. How do I word this? They were families, let me put it that way. Families that were given factories by the government. The reason being, hey, if you're going to involve yourself in a modern economy, you got to have modern businesses. But it's really risky for somebody to suddenly change how they do business and do things totally differently. So this was a way of incentivizing people to be trusted to run factories for the benefit of the society. Names of Zaibatsu that you probably are aware of? Everybody heard of Mitsubishi? What about Toyota and Honda? These are all Zaibatsu. Yeah, they're still around today. Cool story. I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Homogeneous societies. Let's talk about our culture for a second. The United States is diverse. We've got people from all over the world who made their homes here and brought elements of their culture here to where you can kind of pick and choose, the things you have for breakfast are greatly influenced by any number of different traditions. I mean, the whole idea of a breakfast burrito is such a weird conglomeration of foodstuffs all around the world, it just boggles the mind. Japan is not like that. Japan geographically is an archipelago. It's a series of islands, So everyone in that area is basically the same. Their culture is the same. That meant that when they sought to adapt new elements, they sought to industrialize, it happened rapidly. I mean, I'm talking 50 years, and they're fully industrialized. That is mind-numbingly fast. Consider this. Europe took 800 years to go from medieval Europe to modern, industrial age. It took Japan 50. That is crazy fast. Now, let's be honest. Part of the benefit is the fact that a lot of the technology had already been invented, so they weren't like reinventing the wheel here. But it's still blisteringly fast for changing everything you know about life. That's Genesis. It's an interesting point. Portsmouth Treaty. This is an important event for a couple reasons. So Japan modernizes really quickly, yeah? And they're going to end up fighting a war with Russia over territories in East Asia. Russia loses to Japan. Now this was significant because this whole racial idea of social Darwinism is that couldn't happen because white people are superior. Well, guess what? They just got defeated. And so suddenly we have that being disproved, but also Japan is now in direct competition not only with Russia, but with Germany, France, and the United States for territories in the Pacific Ocean. They enter the great imperialist game, and that's going to basically add fuel for a lot of things that happened in World War I and World War II. So the Portsmouth Treaty kind of launches all that. So let's talk isolationism. Isolationism is basically being independent from all of these other global conflicts and global ideas and things like that. It's partially fueled by Japan's belief that their own culture is superior to everybody else, but they're also not 100% isolated. They actually had 1 or 2 ports that were still open to trade from the Portuguese, or the Dutch, excuse me, not the Portuguese. So they were still aware of some of this new technology rolling in, but they didn't see it as really necessary. However, at the beginning of the 1800s, the United States sends Commodore Matthew Perry with his armada to open trade relations by force, if necessary, with Japan. So Japan is forced under duress by the Americans to open their trade ports, and this turns the samurai against the shogun. They rebel. And in his place, they restore to the throne the emperor. Now, the emperor had been around for quite some time. Even after the fall of the empire, the emperor was still the head of the Shinto faith, so he was still around. He just didn't have the political power. Now he does. And realizing how woefully behind Japan is to the rest of the European states, and basically the rest of the industrialized world, he begins a process of modernization. This period of time is known as the Meiji Restoration, both from Meiji's restoration to the throne and the modernization of Japan. Now, a word or two about what goes on. Immediately after the Americans opened up, England and France and Germany all forced trade concessions on Japan. Those trade concessions over time are going to be overturned as Japan goes about setting up its own modern military, which, by the way, it's going to buy mostly from Germany because it's going to need instructors, it's going to need advisors, it's also going to need materials. So it begins developing a modern navy and a modern army that can take on the rest of the world. And one of the big problems with Japan facing industrialization is a lack of raw materials. Japan does not have a lot of natural resources. Still to this day, it does not. In fact, one thing that's very interesting I find about Japanese sword craftsmanship is the kind of mythos that's developed around the katana. Like, I've seen people make some pretty inane comments about katanas, like, oh, they can chop other swords in half. This one guy chopped through a concrete wall and things like that. No, they can't. It's a steel sword. It's no different than that. What's actually fascinating about Japanese swordcraft is that Japanese iron is an inferior iron quality than that was found throughout the rest of the world. And yet they made a sword equal to any other through craftsmanship, through folding the metal countless times. Well, not really countless, that's a bit of an exaggeration, hundreds of times, about thousands. And this created a harder crystalline structure within the carbon, the iron and steel matrix. It made a fantastic blade out of really bad materials. That's what's fascinating about it more than anything else. So they need raw materials. Well, guess what? They're going to go get them from other places. This begins the period of Japanese imperialism in Korea, in Vietnam, in China. And the relationship is going to be fairly antagonistic. For instance, there's one incident where Japan needs an excuse to go invade. And so what happens is a railway is bombed. A Japanese railway is bombed, and so the Japanese say, aha, this is a reason to go to war, and they invade the place. Turns out they're the ones who set the bomb in the first place. And the treatment when the Japanese take over is pretty one-sided. Like, they go in and immediately start replacing everybody with their own people. Again, Sort of like what the Europeans are doing in Africa. Furthermore, there's resistance. In 1919, for instance, on March 1st, that was the March 1st movement, where in Korea they revolted against the Japanese. And ultimately, today, there's a lot of animosity between Korea and China and Japan over what was done during this era. But ultimately, this kind of overturning of the traditional kind of spectrum of Europeans coming and taking over everything is going to be quite a shock to European sensibilities, and it's also going to kind of fuel this Asia versus the West mentality that's starting to develop. Now, the Treaty of Kanagawa was the treaty that was signed by Matthew Perry and the Shogun that ends up setting off the rebellion of the samurai in the first place. And this revolution, and again, it's sort of ironic because, it ends up, like the samurai set it off, but end up being weakened because of it and disappearing because of it. So I guess in a way it's kind of sad. And, it's interesting culturally, in Japan, the samurai still remains kind of like a center of cultural identity, something that people could aspire to in a way. It's just a thing of legend, if nothing else. But another thing to understand is the effects of psychological warfare. These are the ships that Commodore Perry was bringing in. Now, if you just look at them from the outside, it looks like they're a bunch of sailing vessels, but they're not just sailing vessels. They are steam vessels. They still have sails because that was what ship design called for. They haven't changed that much yet. But they do have steam. They have giant wheels in the back pushing along the ship. What does steam do? It's loud. It's noisy. Yeah, exactly. Think about from a Japanese perspective. You're a peasant farmer. Just plowing your fields, and then you hear this loud, noisy, thundering thing go by, belching smoke and fire. The equivalent would be if you woke up this morning and saw that.
I was just about to say War of the World.
Well, this isn't World of Wars. This is from Independence Day. But yeah, kind of the same thing. The movie Independence Day.
War of the World.
Yeah. Suddenly aliens make contact. Think about what we would do if that, like, for real. Like, aliens are like, what's up? Ah! You would freak out.
Run.
Run and scream.
There's that quote that's, I forget who said it, but it's, we have to realize that there's only two options. Either we are alone in the universe, or we are not. Both are equally terrifying.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, those are true things. And there's also been, like, people have used it as a thought experiment, not necessarily like, what's the term, like, UFO faux enthusiast or anything like that. But if you think about it, okay, assuming that aliens were existed, and they came here, the amount of energy it takes to travel like that huge of a distance, they're probably not coming here just to say hi. They're probably coming here to conquer us. And basically it's the imperialist game all over again, only it's intergalactic.
That's so weird.
Personally, I like the idea of they come here and be like, we heard about this Chick-fil-A thing. We really want to have some of that. It's like, I will buy aliens Chick-fil-A. We'll check out Culver's. Who doesn't? Cheese curds all around. But I mean, there's all kinds of things people have thought about in regards to that, and it's the same sort of mentality. I mean, that's what happened. That's what happened between nations. It's the same basic methodology.
What if they're like the same as us though? Like, what if they're different? Like, what if they're like the same as us?
It's exactly the same. Be like, well,
Or what if it's
interesting.
Ender's Game?
Hey, you guys saw Ender's Game. What good for you?
I want to.
It's a good book.
Sarah.
Yeah. Oh, that whole there's a series on it, and the series is quite well done because he asks some pretty interesting questions. What's the quote from Ender's Game? It's humans never start the conflict, but they always end it with the most blood on their hands. Ooh. Because genocide. Anyway,
Okay, it's really bugging me. Isn't that the guy in Friends named Matthew Perry?
Yes.
I said Matthew Perry just wants to be friends with
Yeah, that's Matthew Berry. It's not the same guy. Those are the two guys you need to know. Let's try this question back here. No, we're good. I actually did see it was pretty funny. A little like posters like, so let's say that you're the first person to actually contact aliens. What's gonna happen? The things like it was pretty funny because like, you know, analyzed wise it was true. Like some of the bad things. Like for instance, there's people who are not gonna believe you, things like that. You're probably gonna get assassinated. That's very sad. That's okay.
I really
Be
think I
famous.
was going Why would it be so hard to believe because there's so many things out there that we don't understand?
Well, I think the problem isn't so much the belief that they exist. It's more the issue of like getting here because the amount of energy it would take is basically like it's just not worth it.
I mean, wouldn't they have to? They would have to be like in another galaxy, right? Because I mean, we haven't like come across them.
Well, no, there's actually a mathematical equation to figure out. Let me finish this up. We can talk more about it.
Oh gosh,
That's it for Maisie. And again, looking at his costume here, again, it's very much Western European, which is why the thing I showed you yesterday with the political cartoon, where he's like a quiet samurai, because we do caricatures, But again, he's going to revolutionize Japan and make it the modern state. Anyways, but the equation, I'm not quite sure the particulars of it, but basically, if you do the math, it comes to there's an estimated something like 4 to 6 different possible civilizations that could exist within the Milky Way galaxy alone. The issue is it's a big frickin' place. Like we can't even make it to our farthest planetoids, with our current space technology. Imagine being able to travel between solar systems and you have like that's not even really possible, beyond a complete misunderstanding of physics or a complete new technology that opens up thoughts to things we just don't understand.
There's no possible way that we're the only one. There's not. I can't. Somewhere out there that has
on Mars or something like that.
Sure.
And that we're just like, yeah, Miss Davis, the theology teacher, said that they used to just talk about our universe, but now we're talking about universes and universes. Like
The multiple universe theory. Oh yeah, you get into some pretty interesting thought experiments with that. Like, for instance, there's the idea of the infinite universe theory. If that is true, that means that there is a universe where we have done everything possible.
Or parallel universe.
Yeah, so there's another universe where I'll be president of the United States.
Like
Things like that.
that sounds kind of cool.
There's also a universe where I drove off of a 15-story building in a monster truck. I mean, if it's theoretically possible, it happens. It's just
That's weird.
it's a thought experiment. There's also one where you're right now eating a lollipop.
I love lollipops.
Yeah, all sorts of things, possibilities within possibilities. By the way, if you guys are interested in like stuff like that, I highly recommend Cosmos. It's cool stuff.
Bigfoot?